Hello everybody and welcome to another Unreal Engine tutorial. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to animate a camera that can fly around your environment. So let's have a look at how we could do this. So I'm going to start, I'm moving this camera around now. This is just the like the actual level viewing camera. To fly around using this method, I am basically holding down the right mouse button and then using W for forward, S for backwards, A for left, D for right, Q to lower the camera, and E to raise the camera. So using those buttons, whilst holding the right mouse button, that allows me to just fly around the scene with ease. Okay, very simple. Now, if your camera is moving too quickly, like this, what you can do is, whilst holding the right mouse button and moving, if you scroll your mouse wheel like backwards, that'll slow the camera down. So look, you see how now I'm moving really slowly, and that's because I scrolled my mouse wheel backwards. If I start to scroll my mouse wheel forwards, camera will start to speed up like that. Okay, so yeah, if your camera's moving too quickly, scroll your mouse wheel backwards whilst holding the right mouse button. Anyway, right, let's get into this. So to do a animated camera, we're going to need what we call a level sequence, and I'll show you how to make that in just a second. So this environment that I've got here, by the way, is the City of Brass environments pack, which is free on the Epic Marketplace, and I'll put a link in the description below as well if you wanted to use this to practice on. Okay. Now in this level, the player starts here. You can see the player start node there. So if I click the play button, this is just the first person shooter template basically. So it's just then chucked me in as a first person shooter template. And yeah, I can walk around this environment and take a look at it. Okay. But we want to make a camera fly around this scene instead. So we are going to need a level sequence. To do that, you need to go to Cinematics at the top here and click Add Level Sequence. And this will open up a browser to say, where do you want to save this sequence? I'm going to make a new folder just here. Right click and choose New Folder. I'm going to call it Cutscene. And I'm going to go into the Cutscene folder. And in here, down at the bottom, you need to name your level sequence. So I'm going to name mine Fly Through, because that is essentially what we're doing. We're getting a camera to fly through the environment. So I'm going to call it Fly Through, hit enter. And then what should happen there is the sequencer window will pop up. So this is the sequencer window. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the tab. So here where it says the word sequencer, click and grab this tab. I want you to bring it down. And when you get this, where it's like clipped on to this bar here, that's where I want you to put it and let go. Okay, so that now puts the sequencer down here. So now you've got two tabs. You can switch between your content browser and your sequencer down here. Okay, it's just a lot easier than having a sequencer window floating around and having to keep like switching from it, particularly if you've only got one monitor. So please dock that down there. Okay, now you'll notice, now I've added this sequence, there's this icon here that's like a film clapperboard. Okay, now this doesn't matter where this goes. This can go literally anywhere in your scene. It's completely invisible in game as well. So if I was to hit play, look, you know, you're not going to see that thing floating in front of me. It's totally invisible, doesn't have any collision or anything. So we don't need to worry about where it goes. Okay, that is literally just a marker, but do put it somewhere where you know where it is, because we are going to use it later on. Okay, so just make sure you know where that is. I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, but what we now need to do is we need an actual camera to animate. So in the sequencer editor down here, you'll see there is an icon that is a camera, and it says create new camera and set it as the current camera cut. So if you click on that, that now has turned my current view into the camera, and you'll see here it says pilot active, cinema camera actor. Okay, so that means we are currently looking through the lens of this camera. And if I was to, you know, use that method of holding the right mouse button to look around and using WASD, that controls this camera currently. Okay, now the one thing that's kind of a pain with this camera at the minute is the FOV is a little bit too zoomed in. Like it's, you know, you can't see a lot. So over on the details panel here on the side, if you scroll down a bit, you can see current focal length, and it's set to 35. I'm going to drag that back Let's see, obviously too far and it kind of goes like that, more fisheye lens. You don't want that much. I'm going to set mine to about, let's go with 10. Yeah, let's round it off to 10. That goes to a, that seems quite reasonable. It's sort of a little bit wide angled so we can see a lot of the environment. So yeah, I think that'll work well. Okay, anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the camera about here. This is where I want the camera to start. Okay, so I'm going to place it here. So now what we need to do is start adding keyframes for this animation for where it's going to start. So down here in the sequencer, in fact, I'm going to just drag that up a little bit so we have a bit more space on the sequencer. Okay, so on the sequencer here, you've got camera output component, and you can edit like the aperture and the focal length and everything here. You can actually keyframe stuff like the focal length, so if you wanted to manually keyframe in like the camera zooming in and stuff, you can do that there. You can even adjust the manual focus as well, so if you wanted it to go like blurry and things like that at any point, you can do that too, but we're not going to touch any of that. That's not what this tutorial is about. We're more on about just moving the camera around. So I'm going to just sort of click this little triangle to minimize that bit. And what I want to expand here is, actually, no, I'm not going to expand it, but this transform bit is the section we want to be worrying about. So here, you've got these little arrows and this little plus icon. So the arrows will take you to the previous or next keyframe that has been made. Now, currently there's no keyframe, so it's not going to jump me anywhere. But the button in the middle here is the one that actually makes a keyframe. So on frame 0 on the timeline, which is where we currently are, I'm just going to click, and you'll see now a red dot appears, and that is a keyframe. So it's now basically saying at frame 0, the camera is going to be, the transform of the camera is going to be in this exact position. So where the camera is now is what it's going to be at frame 0. I'm then going to move the slider along, let's say about 3 seconds. So this is running at 30 FPS, by the way. Look, you can see it there, 30 frames per second. So that's 1 second, that's 2 seconds, that's 3 seconds. Okay, so at 90, we're at 3 seconds long. So I'd say after about 3 seconds, I want the camera to be maybe like the end of this corridor area here. So sort of over there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down right mouse button and move the camera using WSA and D. And I'm going to get the camera to be about here. And let's say, I don't know, I want it looking kind of this way a little bit as well. So I'm going to angle it about there and say, yeah, that's where I want it to be at 3 seconds. So what I need to do now is then come back down here and click that little plus icon again to add a new keyframe. Okay, so that is now added a second keyframe there. And you can see using the little arrow now, I can jump back to frame 0 and I can jump forward to that keyframe I just made. You can also click and drag the timeline here to scrub across the time slider and see the animation. So this is currently the animation we have. It goes from 0 to 90 frames. You can also press the space bar to actually play the sequence. And space again will pause it. So we now have our first little bit of animation there. Okay, but let's do a bit more. We want the camera to fly around more than just to there. Okay, so let's go to let's make the timeline a bit longer for a start. So at the minute, as you see down here at the bottom, we're not actually viewing the full timeline. Some of it is cut off here. So you can click this little bar here and drag it along, and that will go right to the end. So currently, this is the end of our sequence where this red line is. Okay, and that is nowhere near long enough for what we want. Okay, so to make it longer, you can go down here and you can actually type in a value down here. I'm going to put in like 5,000 for now, just so we've got plenty of time to work with. And you'll now see that that bit we had before is now just this small section here. And what we need to do now is get that where that red line is. If you hover your mouse over it, you'll see it changed to this icon, and you can click and drag all the way out. I'm going to drag it right to the end. Okay, so now that's the full sequence. However, the other issue we have, look, as I get past that bit, this bit here is what camera is currently active, because you can have multiple cameras and have it cut between different cameras. So this first camera here is basically going to end at frame about frame 147 or something like that. That is not what we want it to do. We want to still be able to see this. What you also need to do here is click on the end of that and drag it all the way to the end as well. So make sure it goes to the full sequence. Okay, so now the camera will be active for that entire sequence. So make sure you do that. Okay. Anyway, let's move along a bit more with the animation. So the first 3 seconds we come through that corridor. I want the camera to then sort of move around this way over here. So I'm going to again check the timeline. I'm going to go to about 180. So another 3 seconds, and then I'm going to move the camera over to, let's do it over to here, looking up at these archways. And I'm going to click the little plus icon to set a keyframe again. Let's have a look how that looks. Obviously it's a bit fast because the timeline's small, but I can hit space and preview it. So the camera comes out, looks that way, keeps moving, and it looks over here. Now, there was a little bit there where I feel that we got a little bit too close to these little pillars here. So I want to move the camera back a bit. So I'm going to get the camera in about this position here. I hold right mouse button. I'm just going to nudge the camera back a few frames like that, and then click on set keyframe. So now when we have a look, the camera now goes backwards a little bit and doesn't go quite as close. So that's a little bit better. Okay. And then we're going to want, let's say, I kind of want the camera to linger on this shot here for a minute. So I'm just going to give it a few frames, and I'm going to hit the set keyframe again. In fact, I'm going to give it a very slight movement. I'm just going to nudge the camera forward just a touch, and then add a keyframe. And then let's go along a bit further from that and have the camera actually then go through an archway to about here and add another keyframe. So let's see how that looks. So the camera comes along, looks that way a little bit, goes around there, slows down, lingers at these pillars for a sec, and then moves on. Yeah, that's not too bad. And then we want it to go around this corner here, so I'm going to, again, just go forward a few more frames, get around to this corner like this. That might be a bit too long. Let's shorten the timeline a little bit and move again. A bit like that. Added the keyframe. Go forward a few more frames. And let's have it looking up at this little lantern thing here. See how that looks. So it comes through the arches. It looks that way. Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay. Right, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to time lapse the rest of it. I'm just going to make a whole animation, just moving the camera a bit, setting a keyframe, moving the camera a bit, and setting a keyframe. So I'm going to time lapse this bit so that you don't have to sit and watch me do the whole thing. But yeah, then I'll get back to you. Okay, so I'm going to just show you something at the moment. I've just gotten to a point here where the animation comes around there, okay, but then this little section here where it moves forward to this corner is a little bit too slow for my liking. So if you find you've got something like that, but you want to speed it up, the easiest way to kind of do that is if you actually click on one of the keyframes down here, you can actually click and drag them along. So I'm going to just drag that a bit further back, and then see how it looks. Now that's a bit better. It's a bit faster now. Okay, so yeah, that's a little tip there. If your animation is too slow, move the keyframes closer to the previous one, and it'll move through that section a bit quicker. If you want it to be slower, you'd click and drag it over the other way and make it further apart. All right, okay. I think I've added enough keyframes there. So let's have a quick look at the sequence from the start. So it goes through here, round, looks at the arches for a second, and then moves on. Around the bend, looks up at this lantern. Then goes through into the other corridor, round past the vines there, the ivy, and circles around the courtyard feature. And then we have a little look inside this room over here, or courtyard. Circles around this. And then finally we head back outside. And then I thought we'd just end by focusing on this big gem here on the floor. Okay. So that's not too bad. There's a couple of little bits here and there that could probably be tweaked a little bit. Some of the timing is a little bit off, but you get the general gist. So, right, the other things we need to make sure of at the minute is we need to actually now reduce the sequence amount, because I made it about 5,000 frames. That's actually way more than I needed now. So I need to make sure that the sequence actually ends sort of, you know, here where I need it. So I'm going to give it maybe a few frames. Let's make it, yeah, let's round off to 2300. So I'm going to click down here, do 23. Well, actually, no, I'm going to drag these back first. Whoops. Accidentally clicked the slider down there. Right, I'm going to drag this back down to roughly where we need it first, and the cine camera act a bit down as well. Right, and then if we click here and do 2300, hit enter, and the same in that box as well, just make sure it's not trying to go any further than that. Okay, so our sequence now ends at 2300. So we now have our actual functioning sequence. So, you know, it can play, it does the whole fly around, and comes back to here. So that's great. The trouble is, at the minute, when I actually hit play up here and go into the game, you know, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't play the sequence or anything. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. So one of them is that we could actually set the sequence itself. If you click on the little clapperboard icon here from earlier, you can actually select that to then autoplay. So if now I hit play, it jumps straight into the sequence and plays it. Okay. However, you might not necessarily want that to happen. So that's obviously handy if it's a cutscene that happens at the start of a level, and you want it to play straight away. As soon as the level starts, you want that cutscene to play. That's fine. Use autoplay. But we don't want that for this. So for those of you that are students of mine that are doing the environment project, the brief states to have a camera moving around the environment that can be triggered by a button press. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, now you also may have noticed when we hit play then, you could actually see the crosshair on screen when we had autoplay on. The sequence has the crosshair on screen. Now that's obviously not what we want. So what we're going to do there is, let's turn autoplay back off, but we are going to tell it, if we scroll down some of the settings here, you'll see that there's a couple of options here for hide player and hide HUD. I want you to tick both of those. Okay, because if in your sequence you happen to see where the player is currently stood, you will actually just see a set of floating arms and a gun. So let's hide both the player and the HUD, and then when I hit play, of course didn't have autoplay on. Whoops. Let's turn autoplay on, hit play, and now the HUD, the little crosshair from the HUD is gone. Okay, so that's what we wanted there. Now, to actually trigger this via a button press rather than being autoplay, let's do that. So I'm going to turn autoplay off. And I am going to now go up to the level blueprint. So I'm going to click here where it says blueprints. Now, before you do this though, actually make sure you have this clapperboard selected. Okay, so make sure your level sequence is selected here first. Okay, so do that, then go to blueprints and do open level blueprint. Okay, and now inside the open level blueprint, we don't actually need those. You might already have stuff here depending on what your project is. So yeah, we don't need to use the event tick or the begin play. So I'm just going to go to a blank area, and I'm going to first of all just right click, and you'll see because I've got that clapperboard selected, it says here to create a reference to fly through, which is what I called the sequence. So I'm going to create a reference to it because we're going to use that in a minute. So create a reference to fly through, and then I am going to right click and I'm going to choose the C key. Okay, so I'm going to type C key, and then in the list you'll see here C for cutscene. So this. Now, those of you that are doing this as my students, I would like all of you please to use the C key in your projects to activate the cutscene. Okay, so please do that. Please use the C key to activate the cutscene, because that way when I'm assessing them and stuff, I know that everybody's cutscene is going to be on the same key, and I don't have to worry about trying to figure out what key you've used for the cutscene. Okay, so please use the C key for cutscene to trigger this event. Obviously, if you're not one of my students and stuff, you're just following this along to find out how to do it, you can use whatever key you like. That's fine. Right, anyway, so when the C key is pressed, what we want to then do is off of this fly through here, I'm going to do, if I drag off and search for play, and then we need to look down in the cinematic section here. We'll look down and you'll see one that says play and then sequence player in brackets. So click on that and you'll get this little extra node here. You get play and then sequence player. Okay, now it'd also be nice if we could play and also stop the cutscene, like skip the cutscene at the same time as well. So what I'm going to do here is off of pressed, I'm going to drag off and I'm going to get a flip flop node. So there's flip flop, and I'm going to connect A into play, but then off of the sequence player again off here, I'm also going to search for stop. There. Okay, didn't need that one, sorry. So just search for stop and then plug that into B. Okay, so let's give this a little test. I'm going to click compile. I'm going to come back out into the main editor and I'm going to press play. So I'm now in the game, and if I press the C key, that activates the cutscene. So let's watch it through once first of all, just to make sure when it gets to the end that it does actually chuck me back into the player. It should do that by default. So let's see. So again, I'll fast forward this bit for you. Okay, then as we come up to the end of the sequence, I'm going to look onto this disk here, and then it should chuck us back into the player. There we go. And now I can move around back into the game again. Now let's try again and see if I can activate the cutscene but then stop it as well. So I'm going to press C. There goes the cutscene, and I'm going to press C again, and yeah, that stops it and brings it back here. Press it again. Let's give it a moment. I'm just going to double check that it's not. Okay, press C and C. Yeah, okay. So it's starting from the beginning every time, which is good. That's what we wanted. Okay, and there you go. That's it. You now have a functioning camera flying through your level, activated by a button press. So that's all I was going to show you today, folks. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.